Detective Samuel Graves sat in his dimly lit office, staring at the case file spread before him. His fingers tapped absently on the desk as he read through the details again. Another disappearance. Another night of searching for answers that refused to reveal themselves. The town of Ashwood had been plagued by a series of vanishings, each one more unsettling than the last. At first, it was a teenage girl named Emily Ross, last seen near Hollow Creek Bridge. Then, an elderly man, Daniel Mercer, who had lived in Ashwood his whole life, vanished without a trace while walking his dog near the same location. A third victim, a schoolteacher named Melissa Vance, had disappeared in broad daylight on that very bridge. The pattern was clear, but the explanation was anything but. Graves leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The bridge was old, abandoned for years after a tragic accident left it condemned. The town avoided it, whispering rumors of curses and unseen forces lurking in its shadow. But rumors didn't solve cases, and he needed answers. That night, armed with nothing but his flashlight and growing unease, Graves made his way to Hollow Creek Bridge. The town was quiet, the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. The closer he got to the bridge, the more his skin prickled. The wood creaked beneath his boots as he stepped onto the structure, peering into the darkness beyond. A chill swept through the air, colder than it should have been. The wind carried something with it, a whisper. At first, he thought it was the rustling of leaves, but no, it was a voice, distant, yet clear. "Help me!" Graves froze. The words were faint, barely audible, but they sent a shiver down his spine. His flashlight flickered, the beam cutting through the darkness, revealing the twisted, rotting wood of the bridge. He took another step forward, his heart pounding. Then he saw it, a crack in the wood, running jagged like a wound in the earth. But it wasn't just a crack. It was something else, something wrong. It pulsed, shifting and moving as if it were breathing. A strange dizziness overtook him. The world tilted, and suddenly he was somewhere else. The town was different, familiar, yet wrong. The sky was a shade darker, the houses decayed and lifeless. Hollow Creek Bridge was no longer abandoned. It stood tall and new, yet the air around it was thick with dread. And then he saw them, the missing. Their faces were twisted in expressions of silent terror, eyes wide as they reached out, trapped just beyond the crack, their mouths moving but making no sound. Graves staggered back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had to leave, had to get away. But the bridge had other plans. The crack widened, stretching towards him, hungry and relentless. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. He was back. The town was normal again. The bridge was the same rotting structure it had always been. But the whisper remained, echoing in his ears. "Help me." Graves turned and walked away, his mind racing. He had seen enough. The bridge wasn't just a place. It was a doorway. And something was waiting on the other side. Something that was not done taking. Detective Marcus Hall stood on the dimly lit street, staring at the jagged crack that split the asphalt like an open wound. His mind raced as he considered the pattern of disappearances that had led him here. The crack was more than just a road marking. It was a doorway. Jane Carter, his partner, stood beside him, eyes wide with fear. "A gateway?" she asked. "To somewhere else," Marcus confirmed. "A parallel dimension, maybe. And I believe that whatever is on the other side also wishes to take us." Jane shuddered, but stood her ground. "So, what do?" Marcus remained silent, weighing his next move. If they did nothing, more people would disappear. His name was already written into this street's sinister history. He could feel it. There was only one choice. "I need to go inside," he said finally. "I must observe what lies beyond. We must put an end to this before it takes another victim." Jane grabbed his arm. "No, Marcus. You have no idea what's out there. You never know what you might discover." He met her gaze, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had to do this, for the missing, for the truth, maybe even for his own survival. Without another word, he stepped onto the crack. The world around him shattered. He fell into the abyss, his body twisting as gravity lost its grip. A high-pitched hum filled his mind, piercing through his thoughts. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the fall stopped. Marcus stood in a warped, dark reflection of the street. The houses were skeletal remains, their windows shattered. The trees were twisted, lifeless husks. A thick fog clung to the air, suffocating and damp. Low murmurs echoed in the distance, voices unintelligible yet pleading. And then he saw them, the missing. Pale, haggard figures with wide, terrified eyes emerged from the darkness. They had been taken. Now they were trapped between dimensions. One of them reached out. "Help us," it whispered, its voice cracking. A shiver ran down Marcus's spine. He had to make a choice. Could he seal the rift? Would it cost him everything? Or should he press deeper into the unknown, knowing he might never return? Behind him, the crack pulsed, its eerie glow beckoning him back. The answer was clear. Marcus inhaled deeply, sorrow filling his heart. He turned toward the crack, determined to end this nightmare, or die trying. The ghostly victims stared at Marcus, their expressions filled with fear and sorrow. They seemed to fade into the darkness, as if knowing their fate was sealed. Their hollow eyes watched him, silently pleading for release. Marcus took one final breath, his silhouette illuminated by the pulsing glow of the crack. His heart pounded in his chest as he stepped forward into the unknown. The crack surged with a final burst of energy, swallowing him whole. And then, silence. The town street stood empty, the dim streetlights flickering in the heavy night air. The crack was gone, as if it had never existed. But something felt off. A whisper lingered in the wind, barely audible. "Help me." A thin mist drifted through the air, twisting unnaturally. The faint words formed one last time before dissolving into the darkness, leaving nothing but the chilling stillness of the abandoned town.